This is The Poet Speaks, a show all about oral tradition.
Hip-hop and cardboard boxes on the block, reggaeton, bandolero, soy yo, heavy metal, punk rock, and la junior high pop.
And what makes poetry so amazing, so incredible, is its absolute fascination and ability to change our lives. The oral tradition, the reason why we speak. This is The Poet Speaks. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast, the #1 spoken word poetry podcast in the world. And our next guest is a Nigerian American poet-pilgrim, collegist, and essayist, presently living in New York City. He's the author of 15 volumes of poems, of which the latest are BAINBRIDGE Island Notebook and To UMBER. His essays on music, poetry, morality, politics, and travel have appeared in various online and print outlets. Everyone, a big, warm round of applause and welcome to the Poet Speaks podcast, Uche Nduka. Uche, how are you?
Great, feeling great.
You feeling good?
Yes.
With this wonderful New York City weather.
We are used to it.
I guess we're used to it. Well, thanks so much for being on our show today. We really do appreciate you spending time and giving us some of your time today. So I have a billion questions for you. Really love your work, love what you represent, and love what you've done and what you've been doing. But I want to start off my first question. Your journey is everywhere, everything all at once to me. You're literally from Nigeria to Germany, to New York City. So you've spanned, your career as a poet and a writer has spanned continents, cultures. From Nigeria, Germany, New York City, those are three completely different cultural interfaces. How those transitions in space influenced, I think, the themes you explore in your own personal writing. That's what I want to first start off with today.
I think that I see poetry basically as exploration itself, It's something that helps us see the world from different perspectives. And it's something that is continually in process. So it's a journey. So those physical geographic journeys I had, I think they definitely influenced my poetry. My poetry itself is a sort of a pilgrimage. That's why I see myself as a pilgrim. And being in different spaces in terms of culture, geography, ideas, and different kind of people who look different from me and all that, I think definitely they enrich the work. Because part of the way I also see poetry is that I see it as something that has to surprise us. Poetry should surprise us. Poetry should challenge the way we see reality and the way we live our lives. It's not just something you write because, you just feel like writing. I think it's rather a calling and not a job.
Wow, that is deep. What made you come to that conclusion in all your years? What kind of made you really realize poetry is that type of journey? What was it? Was it a moment, a pivotal event? What was it that has led you to that very deeper meaning of a really niche form of art that many people don't consider poetry as something that changes reality? What led you to that?
Well, I think it's simply experience, perhaps, and my inclination and temperament. Right from when I was born in Nigeria, let me say my first 10 years, during the Nigerian Civil War. That war took about 4 years of my life, so to say. I had always seen reality as something a little bit questionable. Reality seems very unstable. It's not something I just assume I know or something I assume I can claim. And part of what that did to my own work is that it makes the work itself an investigative kind of process. I find myself investigating not just reality, but aesthetics itself. How do we keep ourselves open for something to enter? For instance, because I feel poetry needs openness, not just physically, but psychically, spiritually. intellectually. So that's part of why the anti-intellectualism for the time being, I just noticed in Nigeria, actually gives me grief. I think any kind of anti-intellectualism, anti-aestheticism is a kind of tragedy. So for me as a person, I feel I'm living in my element. I'm being myself when I write poems. I don't have actually lots of theories about it, but I just feel this is what I'm called and put in the planet to do. And I'm just going to keep doing it.
I love that. I love that. It's what you're called to do, and you're just going to keep doing it. No, I love that. I think that's very rare that people ever find that type of passion in their lives. I think that's very, very rare to be able to find. I mean, so I guess the question though, from that, you have to kind of ask, what is your, like I said, Nigeria, Germany, New York City. I mean, what is your favorite spot? What is your favorite environment to be in out of all those places?
I would say all of them, actually, because without Nigeria, I wouldn't be here physically. And Europe itself, I lived in Germany and I lived in Holland. Those spaces helped grow my art and my artistry. My exposure to different ways of writing, different ways of seeing life, different cultures. I feel in lots of ways it toughened me as an artist and as a creative person. It let me widen out, so to say, to embrace the world more than perhaps when I was in Nigeria. It taught me that actually I'm a citizen of the world. I'm a global citizen. I don't just see myself as just a Nigerian. I believe that the world belongs to me. So all those places I went to, I look at them also as what? Holy spaces. That's part of why I call it a pilgrimage. I made pilgrimages to those places. I'm a pilgrim from Nigeria that went to Germany and then went to Holland. And then from there, I returned. I came to New York to live. But meanwhile, from New York, I have been able other places from here, Romania, South Africa. And so it's like the journey continues. So for me, again, all these places influence me stylistically, thematically, in a visionary way, because it means that I am kept busy. It keeps me busy. There is no time when I'm really bored. There's no time when I feel I don't know what to write about. There is no drought to my artistry or to my work. There is always something to write about, particularly when I'm calm enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And so you mentioned that term. I've actually never heard of it before, Poet-Pilgrim. So that's what you call yourself. I mean, so tell me how specifically has that shaped your writing? Like you said, you're a citizen of the world. Does that bend your viewpoint when you're now writing, something that you feel is such an intrinsic part of your soul? Being a poet, pilgrim, citizen of the world, as you call it, how has that shaped you as a writer?
It shapes the work itself in the sense of making it open to whatever is available. It's almost like magnetic. It attracts the poem, attracts what it needs. Just like different books, for me, any book is an occasion to be able to try at least something I have not done before, either stylistically or thematically. So it is something that I find fruitful and enriching in terms of the work itself that I serve. I serve poetry.
I love that. So kind of moving a bit along. So now you're a citizen of New York City. You're of the world, but now currently you are in New York City. So as someone that knows New York City very well, New York City is the most intense, loud, busybody. I mean, you have 1 billion thoughts racing per minute living in a place like that. Yeah. I mean, how for someone like you that's so interceptive, you're so introspective of the place you are, how does a place like the city, especially in these days, this time period we're in now, I mean, how has the city of New York, I mean, how's that infiltrated your work as a writer?
In fact, I think that, again, it enriches the work. It brings so much to me to be able to put in poems. For instance, if I look around me, there are almost the whole world is in New York City. Almost everybody from different what they call them, not planets now, but kind of different parts of the world geographically. The Asians, Europeans, Africans, Latin Americans, everybody's practically in New York City. And it seems again, perhaps, that what is happening is that the power, the auras of these different individuals do something inspirationally to me. Because since I arrived in New York City in 2007, I've never stopped writing. Lots of people say that, they come to New York and they feel under siege. I don't know why. I can't explain it. But all New York has given me has been inspiration. And the challenge to be able to say, you know what? Yes, it's very, very frenetic here. It's busy here. But still, I'm going to be doing what I'm putting the planet to do, which is write poetry. Share it with people. Teach when the opportunity rises. Learn. Because I think that a poet is a perpetual student. You always have to learn. You always have to be open. To me, it's not about the mastery, that you master the art. I don't look at poetry in terms of mastery. I look at it in terms of something that actually educates me, enlightens me, spiritualizes me as an individual. And so it's a very, very humbling situation. And New York has continued to give me that.
I've actually never heard someone describe it as that. Poetry, you said, so it humbles you.
Yes.
You use that word. Tell me, how does poetry humble an individual?
Because for me, I see it as a service that I'm called to give. And when you are the servant, you are in a humble situation. You are hierarchically, a servant is lower, so to say. Just like the word a pilgrim. A pilgrim is not somebody who goes to own things. You are there to experience things. That's why you are pilgrimage. You don't really own any space. You're just there temporarily. And to me, that's the way I see the work that I do. Any place I am, I don't see any kind of finality, apart from the natural impermanence of our situation in the world, that we're very, very impermanent here. No matter what we do, no matter what we own, no matter our influences, we're going to live here one day. And that particular situation, I don't find it tragic. It's actually something beautiful. Because what it does is that it shows us how precious the gift of life itself is. And that we should not waste our lives in bitterness, looking for people to dominate, to demean, people to show how powerful we are, how influential we are. I find that actually very distracting and boring.
Absolutely. No, I love this. I love this energy that you have towards poetry. Now, I almost want to say, as someone that's also Nigerian and Igbo, I feel like it's almost in our culture and our blood to really be of the arts. I honestly really do believe it's just in the spirit of our people. Tell me, how much of your kind of artistic as a poet, how much was that received well by your family? But I know, as much as it's in our blood, it's not necessarily always perceived well when we're anything outside of maybe these stereotypical great careers like doctor, lawyer. How was it pursuing the arts specifically as a writer? Was that encouraged by your family? Were you supported well in this endeavor?
Well, not quite. They didn't support it. They didn't discourage it. In fact, I think it baffles them. I remember when I was a teenager, when I started writing and all that. At some point, my dad just says, you will outgrow this. And not in a sort of a bitter way, but he just felt, it's one of those phases you'll pass. At 17, you're just gonna outgrow this. And my first book, titled Flower Child, appeared when I was 25 in Nigeria, 1988. When that book came out, my father just somehow looked at it. He didn't say much, but what he did was he went along showing it to all his friends behind my back. He was proud, actually, that his son, wrote a book.
Wow.
But I don't think that in terms of profession, because somehow he always felt, and I think the entire family felt, you're going to starve, a poet, an artist, how are you going to live, and so on. So I understand that kind of confusion. It's as if I really confused them by what I took seriously, what I chose, that, look, listen, I just realized this is my life's work. And as a teenager, for you to say that, of course, adults are bound to say you are crazy. How do you know? You haven't even experienced anything in life and all those things. But the truth of the matter, like you said about our culture, I remember my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, telling me, you know what? As a child, you were the best dancer in the village. I loved dancing. I loved dancing to gongs. I loved playing gongs, playing drums. Following masquerades around and being a masquerade myself, and all those sort of things that I didn't use the word art for. They were just natural. I grew up in that environment where music is not just for entertainment. It's usually something you use to celebrate births, deaths, seasons, and so on, New Yam festivals. You see, all those things to me were very, very natural. And that presence of music is still, I realize, is still in everything I've written, every book I've written. Music has been very, very central in there, without my even planning it to be. So in terms of the family, like I said, now in these days, they just have accepted it. It's about just they accepted that this is what this brother seems to be doing. And he's been doing it now for decades. So we just allow him to. So I appreciate the fact that there is no hostility towards it. But like I said earlier on, they didn't understand what the whole thing was about when I started doing it as a teenager.
Yeah. That's such it's such an unfortunate, I'll be frank with you. I feel like it's so unfortunate. A lot of people, like you said, poetry, it has the power to change so much, bend reality. It's so unfortunate. So many people that are poets, writers, they don't get maybe the proper familial support, that they should, because it is such a incredibly courageous endeavor as a career. You really are, like you said, a pilgrim. You're trotting on unspoken things to really help people see things that they've never seen before. So I do wish that more people kind of supported, people in their family, whether it be children, whoever in your life that really does take this path. So we do appreciate you, though, for continuing on with your path, regardless of, whatever the upbringing brought, following your heart. You've obviously changed a lot of people's lives with your amazing work. Now what I find interesting about your poetry, so you blend language and reality. And I feel like that's an interesting kind of mix, blending different languages as you write. Have you ever written a poem, I guess I want to say, that kind of, and as someone like you that's so perceptive with the art of poetry, you find it as a humbling experiencing to write. Have you ever written something, maybe that scared you, or something that unsettled you as a viewer, as a voyeur of this world? Have you ever written something that's kind of shooken you up a bit?
In fact, I was writing a line about that. I think it was yesterday or something, which is that I'm drawn to things that scare me. If I look around, I might even find the exact whatever it is, where I wrote about it, because I don't know how you even mentioned that, suddenly. I'm very, very drawn to things that scare me, because I would say things that challenge me. Because if something doesn't challenge me, why do you keep doing it? I'm not somebody who just thinks you have to be replicating something. I don't like branding. There are people who feel this is your brand, right? This is the way you have to do it all the time. And I believe that you don't really need to be the same kind of poet all the time. You don't need to be writing the same poem all the time. If the poem desires something else, you must have the courage, the propensity towards following the poem, being loyal to the poem. It's not about your own image. It's not about what the critics have written about your work. But I'm always asking, what does the poem want? Where does it want to go now? Where does it want me to where does it want me to follow it to? And that actually comes back to about being scary. It's a scary thing to do. But because I'm used to it now, I no longer use the word scary, for it. It's just my way of being. And I realize that's the way that actually poems come to me, because somehow they seem to know that I'm open to whatever it is they are suggesting, whether it's very, very contradictory or whether it's something that people might just say, how can you say that? People don't say these things in the open. And I'm like, for my poetry, if my poem desires that that thing should be said, I will say it. And that's part of something I'm grateful, I would say, to the universe for being able to give me that particular equipment, to be able to listen to the poem and not really to any other institution or nations. Because it's very, very important. I know it's natural for us to be encouraged, for us to be praised. We love praises, to hear it and all that. But you know what? If the poem wants to contradict itself in terms of book to book, the way it's doing in my own work, I just follow it.
Yeah.
I just follow it. Like I said again, I am there to be able to do what the poem wants me to do. And that's, again, it's just not easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea of being there to do what the poem wants you to do, it sounds almost to me like you, to lack of a better term, you submit yourself to the art. You
Yes.
submit yourself to what you believe is the greater power of the spoken word, the oral tradition.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me perfectly into my next kind of question, right? So your work, it's been translated into many different languages.
Yeah.
Okay. So like when you see your poem, let's say you write this poem in English, when you see it translate into a different voice, as in a different language, do you feel like it leaves your voice as it enters another culture? How do you feel when a poem changes like that?
Yes. Well, I simply feel that what's happening in that instance is what is called approximation. No translator will exactly translate the poem from another language to the other one exactly, or else it will become so wooden. I always, when translators contact me, I tell them, turn that poem into a poem in your language. I'm not trying to tell you to summarize or paraphrase my poem or follow it line by line the way it is written in English. Turn it into a creative product, so to say, something like sort of something that already is produced. So in that aspect, I don't really go after, is the translation exact? Is it accurate in that way? Because I feel that part of what the poems are trying to do is that they're trying to create a community around the world. You see, these poems go to where they need to go. And at times the poems know better, because I don't even know why those translators have been interested in those particular poems. Because I don't tell the translators the poem to translate. They just get, across to me from wherever it is they've seen the book or whatever it is like one of my translators, Finnish translators, told me she saw my copy of my Facebook, the one that's published in America, 2007, Elon Reef, in a library in London. And she's from Finland. She grabbed it. She went on and translated, almost half of the book, did an anthology because of that on African poetry, selected poems from that book to, for that anthology and so on, and asked me to even do a book together with her, which we published, so we did a book together. I write in English, she writes in Finland and translate it into Finnish and send it to me. And we go back and forth. The book is out in the world somewhere there, Finnish book. So whenever it comes to translation, it's not something that I myself, I walk towards. It's one of those things I accept in the fact that the poem itself is always more intelligent than the poet. And I feel that the poem knows where it wants to go more than me. The poem is bigger than me, the writer. So the same way when it comes to translation. I just let it lead.
I mean, that is a powerful statement to kind of make, again, you always seem to circle back to, you just let the poem lead. For those that are listening, what does that even look like? What does that sound like to in this case, let your poem lead? But I think even in a greater sense, what does it look like to let your art lead? What does that even fully mean?
From what I've discovered for, say, years of doing this, for years of writing this, what I've discovered is that it makes the work itself adventurous. You see, that's the word. It becomes adventurous. It's almost like pathfinding. I'm always finding new paths. It opens up new spaces within the work, so that even when you are, say, dealing with a particular theme, whether it's political, whether it's psychological or philosophical, you say, almost every theme has been dealt with in the world in terms of writing and poetry. But the issue is, how do you, specifically the poet, how do you deal with that theme? And that's what the poem keeps teaching me itself. The poem becomes a teacher in terms of variation. So, for instance, when I write about a political situation, it's not always, I don't write it the same way all the time. When I write about love, I don't write it the same way all the time. And not because I force it, but just simply because, again, the poem leads. The poem tries to tell me where aesthetically it might need to go, stylistically. What do I need to, I need to be verbose in this particular poem, or should I be more restrained, or should is there something I feel that, what I'm talking about is that I try to avoid self-censorship. Because the real killer of any kind of artistic enterprise is self-censorship. We always feel you have to censor yourself because, this doesn't seem to pass for what you will really say. This doesn't want to pass for what will go very well with your image or with whatever it is critics have already written about your work. What about the reviewers? What are they going to say? So there is that fear in lots of artists about reception. And in my own case, I feel it's unnecessary. I don't have that kind of fear. Anybody has the right to interpret my poem any way they choose, because once that poem is out of my hand and it is published, it's beyond me. So I can't sit where I am deciding on how people is going to react to the poem, or wishing this is how they're going to react to it. To me, my first duty is to do that work, write it, let the poem find its fullness first. Then when it gets out there in terms of to people, my hand is off. Yes, my hands is off.
I would think there's such a freeing quality about that, though, kind of just having that freedom and that feeling of freedom to where it's, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily care about the reviews, critiques. I spoke to what my soul was wanting to speak to. And once it's out in the world, it's out in the world. What is there more? What is there more for me to do, right? Is there a freeing quality in that, you think?
Oh, yes. I think so. I'm just guessing because almost with these things, it can be very definitive, in terms of, or absolutist in terms of assertion. Because for me, I also feel that what I'm doing is always provisional. It's not oracular. I'm not an oracle. I'm always trying to be able to guess and see things the way they perhaps want to present themselves. And in that sense, it's just always, again, provisional. It's because it's ongoing. And the way I see my practice, it's not something like I tell myself, you know what, you're going to write this book this year. You're going to do that. I don't do that, and in that sense, I also feel that even what's going to happen in future regarding the work, I don't know. I just don't know. The poems have to tell me where we are heading next.
Yeah, and I feel like that may be probably in a lot of ways the best way to kind of go about, not only just your artistic work as a writer, but maybe just life. I mean, we can only bend the universe to our will so much. At the end of the day, the universe is uncontrollable matter that we have no control over. You can only control the
Beautiful.
things in front of you, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. I do appreciate that, especially for people, that listen to this show that are first time writers or second time writers. To hear someone of your kind of skill level and experience and, success level to say that, hey, you know what, I just let it go. I let the work speak for itself. It will be received where it's supposed to be received. People will decline it when they're supposed to decline it. You know what I mean? Then maybe be open back up to it again. So I think that that's such a beautiful thing to come to arrive to that process of feelings. Now that I do want to ask though, I mean, for you, is there any misconceptions you think about your work, your identity, or your process in the same breath that you wish people understood? Is there anything about you as, Uche the poet? Is there anything about you in that space that you wish people would understand? Or do you think there's misconceptions about your work as a whole?
Yeah, I think, well, the only aspect of that question I would say I don't like very much is when people think they have to preempt you as a writer, right? That because you come from a certain culture, they already feel, I know how this person will write. He or she or they. This is the way, this is what I expect them to do, And I keep thinking, why do you think we have to be a chorus? Why do you think that people, from my culture or from the continent I was born in or the country I was born in or specifically the culture, Igbo culture I was born into, that we all have to be a chorus? So part of the misconception I see at times in readers is that they tend to preempt the work. They tend to preconceive what the work ought to be. And I find that tiring sometimes. They are not open as they should be, as the work itself is in terms of the reception. They just want to do what? To reduce it to be a product of this person from this culture and all that. But the poems absolutely refuse that. The poems themselves absolutely refuse to be reduced, demeaned, categorized, pigeonholed. So that kind of stuff, like I said, it's there. We live in the world. Not everybody will understand you, even on a daily life, in the lives we live. Lots of people will not understand the choices you make as a person. And you also have to accept that that's part of being in existence alongside other people. Everything doesn't have to be about you or what you want. We must learn to know that there is that kind of heterogeneous nature to existence. And existence itself is something that we can't fully define. It's something that actually, on the other way, defines us, tries to define us. So seeing that aspect of, I will call interpretation or misconception, it doesn't bother me anymore. It used to when I was starting earlier on.
Tell me, I want to kind of deep into that. Why did it bother you early on? What was it about it that bothered you in the beginning stages?
Like people expecting me to write a certain kind of poem. It has to be activisty, right? You have to be yelling all the time, about blackness. You have to advertise that you are black from the first line. You have to yell about how the whole world, is on your neck and all that. And then I just think, you know what? Poetry for me is not only mournful or about protest. It's also what? It's a celebration. It's a loving exercise. You make love with words in poetry. So, and when you make love, you are not fighting at that moment. So why should you expect a poet to all they do for 24 hours is fight? It's not necessary for my kind of temperament or the kind of poems I write. That doesn't mean that I'm blind to say injustices in the world. But I'm not here on the planet to only write about injustices. There is no group in human creation that hasn't had injustices visited upon them. No race. So why should somebody allow their whole production just be about injustice, or for instance, only about racism. I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. The poems wants to do other things because there is so much beauty in this planet that we tend to forget. The poem wants to celebrate, the poem wants to celebrate beauty, want to be immersed in beauty. And not only the poem, myself, the body behind the poem. The poem is embodied now and then. I'm somebody who loves beauty. And I think that part of being a poet is not just about cultivating beauty, but fighting for beauty.
Tell me, I mean, what do you think about that? You've hit on such a point that I think many Black writers feel, but may not even know how to articulate. There is this expectation you are to just speak about your Blackness immediately. Like you said, that is almost on your forehead. You must talk about that maybe 24/7, or that has to be somewhere included in your spiel, your shtick. Like you said, you don't like brands, but that must be part of your brand. I mean, what do you think about that representation, even just in today's world as a Black writer, as a Black poet? Do you think that is we're trying to slowly go away from that and see Black poets as multidimensional as opposed to putting us all in a monolith? Do you think we're moving away from that? Or do you think at times some would have regressed and we're still aiming back to, you must only talk about, that one part of your identity?
I think it's going back and going forward at the same time. Sometimes we take steps ahead, right? Some steps ahead, and then sometimes people just go to regress about it. And then I think that particular issue, each poet has to deal with it. You can't legislate for other poets, because I keep saying again, we are not monolith. We're not a monolith. We are different people. And the Black poets should be able to know that actually there is strength in our differences. It's not when we are different aesthetically, the things that move us, or the way we do things stylistically or structurally or so on. It doesn't in any way diminish us. It actually enlarges. It brings up to a sort of a certain respect the work we are doing. If we look at poetry as something that is there before we were even born, and it's going to be there after we are dead. It's not something that we just come in and grab by the throat and think, oh, it's ours. And we just make all this loud noise about it, and then it goes on as if it's a fashion. I don't see poetry as a fashion. I see it as a way of life. It's a way of being. Poetry is a way of being. It's beyond what you write. Poetry is the way you live, the way you cook, the way you dress, the way you walk, the way you make love, the way you read. All of that is poetry. People should not reduce poetry to some infinitesimal element and then claim that is our culture, or that we are struggling. We are always in a struggle. No, I'm not always in a struggle. Lots of the times I'm just having fun. And I have a right to have fun.
Absolutely. And one thing I think I love about your poems is, you mix that, that's very clear what your stance is. You mix grief, you mix joy, you mix politics, but you mix that playfulness, you mix fun into your writing. I mean, and it's, I guess for some, they look at that as contradictory emotions, but, you still see that you're able to keep a poem alive because of those contradictions. Yeah. And it almost, I feel like I take away from that. That's because life is contradictions.
Beautiful.
We're in a constant state of playfulness and grief. We're in a constant state of a lot of painful contradictions, right? No matter what our identity is, do you see that? That's how you kind of navigate your writing?
You put it beautifully, the way you express that. That's the way, what I aspire towards in my writing. because when you are under this kind of pressure that sometimes, people who look like us are under, we always cast as heroes or heroines, warriors. We always have to be warriors all the time. I'm like, life is also not always war. Why do we, or some people perhaps temperamentally, for some people temperamentally, that's the way they take their being in the world. So I'm not even condemning that. But what I'm saying is that they shouldn't throw that on my shoulder. So people should not think I have to be a warrior 24 hours a day. I'm a lover. And I want that there also in capital letters. I'm not just a warrior, I'm also a lover. And I don't even see that as contradictory. Because love itself is a holy war. You see? So that's the way I'll put that for now.
Absolutely. Love itself is a holy war or unholy war. There we go.
Yeah.
I love it. Love it. All right. So, I do have a question for you. I think this one is one that I thought about for some time. I mean, as someone that is so in tune with their writing and the kind of social construct they live in, I mean, if you could erase one rule or maybe one expectation about poetry entirely, what would it be and how would it change the way people write or read poems?
I would say people should just remove what a poem has to be, subject-wise, or how a poem has to look structurally. There should be freedom regarding thematic exploration. There should be freedom regarding the structure of the poem. I think those two things are very, very important to me, because this is part of what I realized, that lots of people, I will call them practically domestic tyrants. They always want to tell you this is what a poem has to be, and this is how it has to be, and tell you that in this season, this is the kind of poems you need to write. Or because, again, I mentioned that you come from this other place, this is the kind of things we expect you to write. We should just completely reject that nonsense. It's bullshit. Nobody should tell us what we have to write about, how we have to write it, or when we write it. Those things are not necessary. In fact, I just feel it destroys poetry. It turns people into a sort of soapbox speakers instead of poets and artists. A poet is an artist, not a politician.
Love that. I love that. Just changing the course of how people expect the poem entirely. I mean, really just allowing it to come to you. No, I really, really do love and appreciate that perspective. Well, Uche, you know what? You've had over 15 volumes of poetry. I mean, decades upon decades of writing. I mean, is there any question that you still have about the art of poetry? I mean, or any type of questioning around language? What still keeps you up at night to keep your gears running as a poet with all the experience, success that you've had?
See, I don't separate poetry from my life in a way. I see them together. And at the moment, it's good that you asked me at the moment, what keeps me up at night? What keeps me up at night is what is happening in Igbo land in Nigeria, where women whose husbands are dead are still expected to cut their hair, because automatically they are doing what? They are suspected that they killed the guy. So for that, they have to cut their hair in terms of Igbo culture, where the female members of the Igbo land can't inherit their father's property. It has to be men who have to inherit the property. We are in 21st century, and such thing is still going on as we speak. Such things keep me awake. The way that women are being demeaned in Nigeria, and particularly in Igbo culture, is just absolutely insupportable and insufferable as far as I'm concerned. And I think that anybody who is a thinker and who labels themselves Igbo should actually be worried and doing something about stopping such oppressive tendencies. There's oppressive tendencies in our culture that shouldn't be going on. And again, the idea of what makes the masculine, you have to be a macho. You have to, everything is about brutality and cruelty and fight. A man is not called upon to be tender. You can't be tender. You can't be soft because you are what? You are a warrior, dike, and all that, I think they're just useless. And I think we don't need them in this century that we entered. And thus, practically, it's more or less what's keeping me awake, much more than any other thing in terms of the poetry writing. Because as for the writing, like I said, that just goes on. It's something that it just goes on. I don't even think, so much about whether I'm going to write or I'm not going to write. Because it just happens when it wants to, in that way. But in terms of the life behind the poem, what I've just said is what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, no, we thank you. We appreciate you having that candor, that honesty, and really educating our audience about what's happening. We really, really do appreciate that. And we really do appreciate you. This has been such an incredible conversation. We really love your diverse perspective, and just hearing your passion for what you do is truly, truly, I think it'll touch a lot of people when they hear this. So we really, really do appreciate you. So, we have one final question for you on the Poet Speaks podcast. We ask every poet that comes on, Uche, why do you need to get your words out?
To share, to inspire, to challenge, to stop people from being complacent about their lives, to actually wake up and live and not living secondhand lives. Lots of people are just zombies on two legs. They are not living the life that they actually ought to live. They are living life they thought or think they are supposed to live. And in other words, I'm putting poetry out there to be able to deepen our existence and to, again, deepen our celebration of life itself.
All right. Thank you so much, Uche. Such a beautiful answer. And again, we appreciate you being on the podcast today. Now, before we end and finalize this episode, we do want you to shout out what you have coming up, what the rest of 2025 is looking like for you. And please drop any links for the website, social media, where folks can go and check out all of your amazing work.
Well, at the moment, I just have a new book out that came out last month. I have To Umber. And that's what I would tell audience to just look for. It's my latest offering. And whatever else we will see. But To Umber, they should go out there and get To Umber. And it's by the Bodily Press. That's the press that I think the press is based in Amherst. And it's online. Once you put To Umber, well, the book pops up. And so let them get the book and let's start the conversation from there. Because for me, that's where the conversation is at the moment. Is anytime a new book comes out, that's where the conversation starts again.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. I highly recommend To Umber. Go check out Uche's book, and the links for the book will be down below. Again, Uche, thank you so much for being a guest on the Poet Speaks podcast tonight.
And thank you for inviting me, Amanda.
Absolutely. All right, again, everyone, Uche's links will be down below in the description box, no matter where you listen to this podcast. Again, check out all of Uche's amazing work. And again, a big, big thank you to Uche for being an amazing guest on the Poet Speaks podcast. Now, remember, we're the #1 spoken word poetry podcast in the world. All right, everyone, remember that. All right. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.